Hey guys, what's up? It's Samantha, and today I am going to be memory keeping the week of October 26th through November 1st, so the week of Halloween, and I am using this really pretty kit from Scribble Prints Co. called Spooky Season, and I pulled in the black matte bow on black washi tape, bow washi from Simply Gilded. I don't know how well the bows are going to translate on screen when it's zoomed out like this, but it's really pretty and subtle in person. And then I pulled in a bunch of gold and light gold foil. Of course, I had to use web headers from Rose Colored Days because it's basically my spooky brand at this point. I love those headers so freaking much. But I am going to just jump into everything that I read this week because I read 9 things this week, and I'm going to have to get through this real quick here. So I did successfully complete my 31 books in 31 days challenge, and I'm just going to dive right in. The first book that I read was Piranesi by Susanna Clark, and this is actually my first book by Susanna Clark that I've read. I know she has that really popular one, like Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell, that's 1,000 pages long or something. I'm not particularly interested in reading that, but Piranesi was maybe 240 pages. I read it all in one sitting, and it was such a lovely story. It's very different from most of the fantasy that I see being hyped or getting big marketing campaigns. It's very much a quieter story, a more literary story, and it kind of has vibes of Narnia mixed with Greek mythology, and it's a very strange book to explain what it's about, but basically you follow one main character who keeps obsessive journals about things he discovers about this weird, never-ending kind of Grecian palace that he lives in that is by the sea, and that's basically all I can say without spoiling the book. It is very strange and wonderful and beautifully written, and I adored it, and I'm very glad that I picked it up. I saw a lot of hype about it, and I knew it was short, so that's why I picked it up for October, and it was so worth it. It was just a lovely, lovely time. And then the next book I read was my October book club pick, and that was The Wicked Deep by Shea Ernshaw. And I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. It might be like a 2.75. I didn't dislike it, but it's one of those books that during the course of book club, the more we talked about it, the more I realized there were some pretty serious gaping plot holes and some things that just didn't really make sense if you thought about them too much. But I will say it was very atmospheric, and the writing was pretty, and I didn't hate reading it or anything. It was a very easy, spooky, atmospheric read, and I definitely liked Winterwood, her second book, a lot more. I loved Winterwood, but Wicked Deep was just okay. It follows this like West Coast town where every summer the ghost of these 3 sisters who were killed for being quote unquote witches come back and inhabit different girls' bodies for a period of time every summer, and they kill men. And so boys on this island notoriously die in strange accidents during this period every summer. And yeah, so we follow like a girl who, a new boy has just come into town, and she ends up kind of developing a crush on him. He's working at her family's lighthouse for the summer orchard island place thing, and she doesn't want him to be killed by these witchy sisters. So that's sort of the premise of this book. And yeah, even though it takes place over the summer, it felt very fall and atmospheric, but it does take place over early summer, which was different. I feel like the vibe is kind of similar to if you've read Summer of Salt by Katrina Leno. The plots are totally different, and I think Summer of Salt is a stronger book, but that sort of cold, foggy, cloudy summer, that's that's the vibe. So then the next book I read was an arc of a graphic novel, and it was Delicates by Brenna Thummler, which is the sequel to Sheets. And Sheets is a really cute graphic novel, that YA graphic novel about a girl who works at her family's laundromat, and through a series of coincidences finds out that ghosts exist, and the ghosts end up using her laundromat to wash their ghost sheets so that they're all clean and white. She's really good at getting stains out. There's a whole thing. It's a cute, fluffy, fun story. But Delicates goes a little deeper. We still follow the girl from Sheets, but we also follow a new girl, and it has to do with what healthy friendships look like and sort of how to balance kindness with discovering, what you want in friends, and like loneliness, and kind of that awkward transition between middle school and high school, and going from being a kid to becoming a teen. And it was just a really lovely story. This one had a lot of heavier topics, and I really liked the girl that was the second character that was added to this book that we also followed. I just thought it was lovely. I actually liked this more than Sheets. I think I gave this one 4 stars. But yeah, it was just a really cute story. So then the next book I read was Lightbringer by Legrand. I did have an arc of this, but I believe I finished it as a finished copy. And I think my library, it didn't have a street date on the invoice, which means we can just put it out as soon as we get it. Even though every book has a release date, certain books, the publisher doesn't care if they go out early on shelves in bookstores or on libraries. So I think I saw the finished copy was there, and so I just grabbed the finished copy. And yeah, it was meh. This whole series was 2 stars for me. It was the 3rd book in the Furyborn series, and I don't know why I read this. I guess I was curious about how it ended, but it was a disappointment even to me, and I wasn't expecting anything out of it, because like I said, I 2-starred everything. I hated Riel the entire time. And there's 2, this is a dual perspective YA high epic fantasy series where we follow 2 different point of views 1,000 years apart. And the premise being there was like a prophecy that there was going to be a sun queen and a something else queen, and like one would save the people and one would destroy them. And the idea being that presumably one of these girls is the Sun Queen and the other one is the other queen, which I can't remember what it's called because I'm terrible. I can't even believe I remember like Riel's name. I just hated her so much. But Riel's storyline is happening like 1,000 years in the past. And then the other girl whose name I'm blanking on, even though I found her story more interesting, is taking place 1,000 years in the present. So like they're 1,000 years apart. That's the premise. There's kind of elemental magic. I would describe it as sort of like Avatar meets the religion from Game of Thrones, which is a really bizarre, I don't know, this needed a sheet at the beginning of all of the different, there's so many characters and so many different lands and leaders and politicians, and I could not keep them straight. This needed one of those lists at the front of the book with all of the characters' names and what kingdom they were from and what their role was and what their power was if they had a power and all of that, because I could not keep anyone straight. My head was just spinning. And then in this book, it added a ton of really unnecessary points of view. The first one is just dual perspective. And then at the end of the second one, a few other random points of view get added in. And then this third one, we were just jumping from person to person to person to person. And I'm like, this was unnecessary. The whole thing was kind of a hot mess. I don't like Claire Legrand's writing style. It's very, very purple and very unnecessary, and it just doesn't vibe for me. I know a lot of people love this series, like unabashedly love this series, but Claire Legrand's writing just does not do it for me. It's just too much, man. So I think at this point I can safely say, no matter how appealing a synopsis sounds, I am never picking up a Claire Legrand book again. Not saying anything if you love this series. I still recommend it to people because I'm comfortable recommending books I personally don't like. I just do not like this series at all. So, yeah, not that I didn't like. There were some elements that I liked. Obviously, I finished the series because I was curious to know how it would end. So I guess that was compelling. The plot was compelling in terms of I wanted to find out how it ended, I guess. All right. Yeah, that's all I can really say about it. It's the third book in a series, so I can't really talk about specifics, but I found the ending to be stupid. So I just didn't think it was worth it. So the next book I read was a very pleasant surprise, and it was Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour, and this was a very short YA contemporary with a little bit of speculative elements, spooky speculative elements in it, and I picked this up because it was short, and the audiobook was available at my library, and I was planning upstairs in my office, and I wanted an audiobook while I was planning, and I didn't have a current audiobook going, and I just downloaded this one, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought this was a really beautiful, insightful look at processing grief and trauma and letting go of those things and healing and kind of the ghosts, the literal and metaphorical ghosts that haunt us. And it was just a really lovely, beautiful story. I think I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's a book I would definitely reread and was just really, really lovely. So then the next book I read was a book I also had an advanced copy of, but I believe I also finished this as a finished copy, and that is Kingdom of Sea and Stone by Mara Rutherford. And this is the sequel to Crown of Coral and Pearl. I believe that was the first one. And I really enjoyed the first one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't think it was anything wildly new and inventive, but it was good at what it did. It was a cute story with a great sister relationship at its core, and I had a lot of fun reading it. It had a great atmosphere. This second book, however, I did not like at all, unfortunately. I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. I was so disappointed by this book. I just really didn't like it. I felt like it took a lot of the stakes that were built in the first book and basically just undid all of them and went in a totally different direction. It introduced a ton of new characters that I didn't really think was necessary, and it added a lot of angst and drama. When the ending of the first book had set up some really interesting things that the author just completely abandoned. So I was pretty disappointed in this. The first book is one that I might reread again. I really did enjoy the first one. It was just a fun fantasy romp. And this one was just such a letdown. So just a bummer. I hate it when there's a duology or a series and then a book just tanks it. And you're there was so much potential here. But unfortunately, 2 out of 5 stars. Then the next book I read was a collection of short stories, and this was also an advanced copy, and it was Tales from the Hinterland by Melissa Albert. This is a series of kind of dark fairy tales featuring the characters from the Hazelwood books that she's written, and they're very dark, very bloody, very gruesome, feminist kind of fairy tales, and I really enjoyed them. It was the perfect Halloween read. It was just dark and bloody, and I really liked it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I just had such a good time with this. If you have read Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, which is a graphic novel, a horror graphic novel, horror fairy tale graphic novel, this felt very similar in terms of tone and what it accomplished. I really liked this one more than I liked either of the novels that she wrote featuring these characters. I really liked the fairy tales. So I'm also a big fairy tale fan, so that's not surprising. So then the next book I read was kind of a joke book, and I don't really have anything to say about it, but since I did these 31 books for my 31st birthday, the next book I read, which I didn't finish until November 1st, would have been my 31st, and I wanted to watch a spooky movie with my husband on Halloween night, so I decided my 31st book was going to be Happy Birthday Samantha, which is an American Girl doll book. So I went downstairs and I got my Samantha doll out and I put her in the Samantha's pink and white birthday outfit, and I brought her upstairs and I read that book, and it was a time, let me tell you. It was a time. I didn't rate it. It was, I mean, they're meant for little kids, but it was just very not captivating, I guess would be like a good way to put it. I'm glad I liked it when I was a kid, but you know, the only redeemable quality in this book was woke Grandmary, which is like a thing. By the end of the book, she's for women voting. So, I mean, you know, progressive for the time, I guess. Not really, but sure. And then the last book I read was a book that I had an arc of and I never got to. And I ended up listening to this on audiobook, and the audiobook didn't come out until months after it was published. And this was The Obsidian Tower by Melissa Caruso. And I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. I vaguely remember bits and pieces of this. This is kind of a political adult fantasy with magic, and there's a bunch of different kingdoms all meeting at one castle, and something goes awry and someone is killed, and like this treaty thing meeting that they're setting up all falls apart, and there's a girl who can't touch anyone because if she touches people, they die. And that's kind of what was going on. It was just very political, and there was like a mystery going on, and there's a spooky, weird tower, and kind of this idea of like, what's behind the door? We don't know what's behind the door. And that's kind of like the mystery that drives this plot, like what dark magic is behind this door in this castle. And yeah, I mean, it was solid. Like, it was nothing to write home about. It was nothing wildly new and inventive. I would probably read something else written by this author. I don't know if I will continue on in this series. It is kind of a complete story, but it sets up at the end for some more adventures down the line. And you know, I wouldn't be opposed to reading something set in this world again. I believe she has another series set in the same world, but you don't need to read one to read the other. So I didn't know that until after I had picked up this book, but clearly, I mean, it didn't impact my ability to understand what was going on. So, yeah, I liked it. I didn't love it. I thought it was just like a solid middle of the road fantasy time. So that was everything that I read this week. It was quite a lot, I know. But I'm really glad I was able to read 31 books in October, and I will never do that again. It was insane, and I don't recommend it. But I survived, and I read some really awesome books in the month of October, and, you know, I can now say that I did it. So, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. As always, my Instagram is linked down below, along with all of the shops that I regularly use in my planner. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will talk to you in my next one. Bye.